Here, and let's just launch in. I assume Senator Ballin will be with us momentarily.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Senator Sorokin. Thank you, everyone, for having me today. For the record, I am Talina Companion with Vermont Association of Wedding Professionals, and I represent approximately 200 businesses across entertainers, caterers, tent rental companies, anyone within venues or B&Bs or hotels that host weddings and events, as well as photographers, etc., florists. And I will fully echo what Aaron and Patty said earlier. I will not repeat what they said for the sake of brevity, and you can certainly ask me questions concerning their comments if you'd like to as well. The hospitality industry, as you know, my business personally has been fully shuttered twice. My business hasn't been open this time since November 14th, when all social gatherings were shut down, and still have not opened up to any type of size. And we still don't have our guidance for when weddings and events can resume. So far it's been 4 months, and it looks like we'll definitely hit the 5 or 6 month mark before we can get up and going again. We're very excited by the governor's comments that we will see a level of normalcy come July, so that we may be able to preserve some of our summer and fall season and get back to work. And one of the biggest reasons why we're here is to talk about getting back to work and this incredible workforce issue that every one of my members is currently experiencing. I do want to talk about the current proposal and the increase. I personally am a recipient of the PUA, and I am a family of 4. My husband is also a recipient, so we've been fully shut down a whole lot from this pandemic, which has been exceptionally challenging. I do thank the committee greatly for the assistance that everyone in our industry received via the grants. We have been left off since September, so that has been challenging. To Keisha's earlier point, that has meant that several of our members have had to begin to leverage themselves and really take on that additional risk, because honestly, they believe in Vermont and believe in your support, and that risk will be worth it, and that they will otherwise be able to make it. One of our giant challenges is many of the contracts we're fulfilling this year were signed in 2018, 2019, maybe early 2020, at rates where we thought, we have to account for the cost of our services when we put out those contracts and when we assign prices to them, whether it's room rates or contracts for services. And that's under the guise that the labor market will stay somewhat level instead of a huge jump. And that's where, if the increase as proposed was to come in July, when we're just trying to ramp up and hire, it creates, it really exacerbates our workforce issue. Just as Aaron said, many of our members right now have a digital help wanted sign up and are deeply struggling. So my husband and I, if S10 goes through as proposed, would actually receive $980 a week, which is the equivalent of $100,000 a year. And that, I think, makes a significant impact on a family's decision to go back to work or not. Alternatively,
Can I just question your math there?
sure.
$980 a week times 52 weeks equals $100,000.
Times 2. There's 2 of us.
Oh, you're both getting $980 a week. Okay.
Yep. If we were to get the maximum benefit, plus because of our children with the $50 a week, it would be $935. It would actually be $985 per week for the 2 of us. So that would mean a household income on purely UI of over $100,000. And then that doesn't include the $5,600 that we just received as a stimulus benefit. And I have 2 toddlers, so they're both under 6. So with the child care credit of $3,600 a piece, that's an additional $7,200 to our household, which increases that significantly. As well as the fully refundable child care credit, dependent care, which is up to $8,000, which is fully refundable.
And you also said you received a PPP grant or not?
Yes, we've received PPP.
I know that's a public record. Could you tell us how much you received?
In 2020, our PPP was 29,000.
Mhm. Okay.
So it's significant when it, when those who are on UI, and also, during the break and before, when I was listening to Michelle, I ran some numbers. I'll send them to all of you. But if I was a single mom with 2 children and I had been receiving benefits as she described, getting $2,600 a month because I was previously receiving minimum wage, then I went out and got a job for $12 an hour. If I include the stimulus payment I would have received of $4,200 and the child tax credit at a minimum of $6,000, if both of my children were over the age of 6, then my monthly income would be $2,900. And that doesn't include any kind of SNAP benefits or anything else that she mentioned. So when I look at it that way, I say, geez, I'm listening to all of you, and what I'm not hearing is, how do we get people back to work? How do we support women? And how do we reopen these childcare centers instead of paying on this side of the coin? Because none of my members do not have a workforce issue right now. None of them don't have a help wanted sign out. And so what we really want is to find a way to, because also we're looking at July and we're looking at a return to normalcy, as Governor Scott said, right? So we're looking at some of the barriers that forced individuals out of the workforce being lifted. They have access to vaccines, they have access to childcare, and all businesses are open. So with all of that removed, it's very difficult to see incentives on the other side or any kind of safety nets placed, because the alternative of them going back to work for their mental health, as Aaron mentioned, seems like the best option.
So I couldn't agree more on the last point. But you've heard discussion in this committee just today about responding to Senator Brock's suggestion that we start this $75 add-on, not as so much as an add-on, but as a softening of the loss of the $300 in September. First, I wonder if that is something that you would support in terms of that change in the date. And, it's sort of, I have to say that it's frustrating to me because we're really trying to help both sides. And to say that the federal government's largesse in trying to help individuals and stimulate the economy should be used against the state of Vermont in providing any additional help. I don't hear the same argument. We have been about as generous as can be on economic recovery grants in light of the PPP, and no one came in and said, don't give businesses any more money because they got so much money from the PPP program. So
that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying if I'm putting myself into this unemployed individual's seat, which is me, and I look at the 2 different pathways that I can take, my decision could be altered based on the passage of this, right? And I fully support any benefits, specifically a dependent benefit, coming into effect in September. If it happens in July, that creates a whole lot of challenges, right? We absolutely need the look for work requirement in
Yep.
July when everything is
Right.
lifted. That
Right.
has to happen.
Right.
And then we absolutely need to help women and others re-enter the workforce by continuing to lift the barriers. And those barriers are availability of childcare. I think that wages are already lifted. I gave you the $12 an hour example. I don't know anyone that's hiring for $12 an hour, right? Almost all of it is easily 13 to 15 or well above. And with the benefits as proposed, you'll make over 100% of your wages at almost $20 an hour if that was your previous wage. And you get the child credit and the stimulus payment regardless as to whether you're working or not. And so it really just changes the family decision. And I agree that there should be some sort of an off ramp, right? There will be people that will still need something when that time comes. There's tens of thousands of people on UI, and that's not sustainable. And I think we need to be very careful about making sure that it doesn't become the norm. It's already been 50 weeks. The American Rescue Plan stretches that to 70 weeks. And women have to re-enter the workforce. And if they have an extended gap, that makes it harder and harder to re-enter the workforce. Whereas if they begin to re-enter in July and August, it's very understandable, right? That was the pandemic, that was the reason for their gap. But as that extends, it becomes a very different conversation.
Well, I hope that, at least, I mean, I agree with you in a lot of what you're saying in terms of getting people back to work. I hope that that the employer community, uh, when the emergency is lifted and the work search requirement is reinstated, will understand that people that they will reach out, especially the ones that are reopening. I think they will, to their former employees if they were on UI, and understand that if the person turns them down, that they lose their entire unemployment check. So I don't think the incentive is sit back and say, or it's risky for them to sit back and say, even though, I mean, right now the traditional unemployment check is at 57% wage replacement. And adding another 20% to that is roughly bringing it, I think Damien told us, either 66 or 68%. It's no bargain, but the mental health comment is good. And I just feel that there's so much value to be working. I don't think to paint with a broad stroke that so many of these people who have been traditional workers want to just take advantage of a 68% wage replacement and not get their job back. The additional healthcare benefits and
I don't
pride,
think anyone's
mental
getting
health.
68%. It's all well above that.
No, but it would be in September, unless you want to start adding every WIC benefit.
If we're talking about September instead of July, then.
Right. Well, that's what I'm suggesting. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Keisha?
And Keisha?
Thanks. So Talina, I was just wondering, what makes you want to go back to work? Like, let's say it's a little bit of a financial burden to go back to work. What makes you want to go back?
That's a really great question. So first of all, I'm itching. I've just redone my living room because I'm dying to do something. And I think we all feel better when we do have those accomplishments, right? It definitely speaks to the mental health aspect of it. And I know what it's like to look long and hard for quality childcare. I've been on several waiting lists, and because of the ages of my children, they're a year and 3 years. I had a ginormous struggle because we had just gotten my oldest into a phenomenal program, and and he was in it for 2 weeks before everything shut down, right? And so that really blew everything up. And my other son was born in January and everything shut down in March. So waiting lists, everything went to the wind, and I really had to start all over again, more than once, with the closures again and again. So the other piece of that is, for people, why they want to go back to work is because I know if I take that option and I just close up shop and take the benefits through September, what doesn't happen is I don't get the chance to employ people, and there isn't that exponential economic recovery of me hiring. Typically I have up to 10 employees. So if I hire them, right, let's think about this. Each employee, if they're making a wage between $30,000 and $60,000 a year, that's creating typically double the economic activity to the state. So we want to make sure that we're driving people back to work, because for every dollar of wage they're getting paid, they're typically bringing 2 or more back. And that's something that absolutely needs to be taken into account.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you so much, Talina. Very good.
I guess I'm just wondering, as you think about hiring people, right? You want people to come back. Do you have people in your network who are excited to go back to work, even if they don't own their own business?
Oh, absolutely. There's a huge, I know you're getting married this year, and it's so much fun, and it's an incredible environment. For me, it definitely brings a lot of adrenaline and fun. Of course, the weather is advantageous, May through September, which also makes it incredible. And there's a whole lot to be said about Vermont and this tourism that we've created. It's a huge part of our economy. And it's fun being able to share that with all the people who travel in for this, right? We meet people from really all over the world that travel in for weddings and events. And it's just really cool to hear them every single time talk about how beautiful, how warm and welcoming the people are in the state of Vermont. And even just while they're sitting there at an event and they've only been there for 24, 48 hours, they're already planning their next time. They're like, we're coming back here on vacation. There's so much that we haven't seen. And we see that time and time again. You've heard me in earlier testimonies and things. They buy secondary homes here, and they come to visit here again, and they bring their children here. Sometimes they then get married here. And so we need that exposure for Vermont back desperately. And we're getting to the point where so many of my members have said, I'm scared and I have to start turning down revenue because I have this great workforce issue. And that's awful. We have been so devastated for so long to finally make it to this point where we have to say no to revenue coming in because we simply don't have the labor to fulfill those contracts. Ugh. If we thought we had a gut punch before, this one's worse.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Please.
Talina, hi, I'm Allison. The question I have for you is, I know that we were going to be issued guidance for the special events industries in early April. Are you getting any sense of where we're landing on that? Because early April is coming up now in 2 weeks. And a lot of decisions are going to be based on that guidance, which will be coming out. Do you have any insights into that at the moment?
It's the biggest weight on my shoulders right now. It's what a significant amount of my communications are. People are saying, hey, I've got cancellations coming in. Are you sure the guidance is coming? Are you sure it's coming? And all I can say is, Governor Scott has told me yes, and I am really, really hopeful. The Tourism Caucus did a phenomenal job of standing beside us and pushing for this guidance as well.
We all have been.
Which, thank you, because it's really the one of the large linchpins. The guidance as well as a workforce to be able to fulfill our contracts and begin our road to recovery recovery is large. And if I could just go back to 1 second, to your comment earlier, Allison, about the $100 weekly benefit and why we weren't kind of shouting to the rooftops then. It was really because we didn't have a light at the end of the tunnel, right? The vaccine wasn't here at that point in time. And we wanted to be able to allow our employees to remain on UI at that point in time, right? Because we couldn't offer them their jobs back at that point in time. And so that was really crucial. And then us as business owners were also struggling. So that $100 a week was crucial at that point in time, whereas we're in a very different spot here and it becomes detrimental.
Well, we hope it won't, because we hope our rehire incentives are going to encourage people to take back their jobs if they are offered to them.
Well, and I think the challenge with that is that it's not all of the people that are on UI at the moment aren't going to be offered their jobs back, right? Whether it's through business closures or whatever the case may be, they won't have their hand forced that way. So that's a large challenge as well. If it was one-to-one, then I would completely agree with you. But I fear as though the number of people who are actually getting offered their identical jobs back is probably a small number.
Okay. Thank you again, Talina. We're going to move on to Carrie Brown.
I think Jocelyn did have a hard stop
Okay.
at 11:30, so we can switch them.
Okay. Jocelyn.
Hello, good
Hi.
morning. Hi, here to testify. My son is here with me, so I apologize in advance if he starts, chattering, but I was a recipient of unemployment, and I'm not really sure where you want me to start, Kesha. I can tell you my entire story quickly, how it affected me, a little bit of my past. You can ask me questions, whatever you'd like. It's really,
Maybe
I'm pretty much.
I'll let Senator Rahm answer that question.
Okay.
Because she has been in contact with you, I understand. So.
And yes.
I think the overall framing is it was, Talina, I appreciate the bravery of people telling their own story with unemployment. We haven't heard that as much in committee. So, if you could spend 2 to 3 minutes talking about your experience with unemployment and the pandemic overall, that would be great. And we're a kid-friendly committee, so.
Okay, yes, that's what I heard. So that's good. He's a good guy. So my experience was actually just a little quick background. I actually worked 11 years remotely for a medical device manufacturing company. And at no fault of my own, I was pregnant and COVID did occur and I lost my job. So the reason I was pregnant also was because I did work remote and I had this good job, and we couldn't see that the pandemic was going to happen, but that was at no fault of my own. So immediately I applied for unemployment, and I had a really, really tough experience with unemployment. I submitted all my paperwork to them. I did all the right things. did have a severance from my job. I submitted that into my claims, and everything kind of seemed a little wonky, but they had said they received everything. And then at a later time, it was that they denied me of benefits and stopped them because of a severance and because of what had happened. And it was a really tough time as a single mother, really tough time going through other different things in my life, and then losing my job, giving birth, the pandemic. But it was a nightmare. Like, I had to reach out to legal aid. I had to have no money coming in, no income, rely on state, assistance as much as I could, which was another whole kind of nightmare for me, but I had not ever been through this. So it was very tough. Unemployment was, I'm not going to lie, was not helpful at all. Thanks to legal aid. I did get the help I needed and get, back and going, but it was a struggle. Having nothing coming in and for the first time in over 11 years at no fault of my own was not something that was easy, especially with a new child. It meant a lot to me. Some of the comments I was thinking of with the money coming in and stuff like that, I made double the money I make on unemployment. So for somebody living in a 1-bedroom in county, a 1-bedroom for $1,450 plus other utilities, almost $1,600 a month for a 1-bedroom, that half that money, I was living on that income that I was used to, over 70,000 or more a year. It got cut drastically. I did get help from WIC, obviously. I did get some assistance food stamps, but they actually took it away because I make $20 too much on unemployment now. So you really have to be at a impoverished level, like impoverished is what I've learned, to actually get these assistances, which as a single mom, it's very stressful. And having this incentive that you guys are discussing would replace, where I was getting those food stamps and stuff like that, because I have that extra income to make up for them taking that away because I make $20 extra, which to me is still not a livable wage, not in Chittenden County. I'm sorry. I was a homeowner in Bristol and everything. My mortgage was cheaper. I'm not looking at a 2-bedroom unless I got my job back, which it's a corporate company. They're making cost cutbacks and they got rid of me. That was it. It was the pandemic and I got paid too much. So bye. I am on unemployment now, but I have a return to work. I mean, not a return to work. I have to search. I do search. But I also don't agree with the $13 to $15 an hour. That's still not, it's barely a livable wage for 2 people in Chittenden County. So I'm going to have to say that's wrong. Child tax credit, stuff like that. I didn't get that because at a certain point with unemployment and my old income from last year, they took that away. You make over a certain amount, you don't qualify for much childcare. It's still expensive, the childcare. It's not like I don't want to work. I do want to work. I had great health benefits. I had a great job. Now I was on Medicaid. They took that away because I made $20 more on unemployment. And now it's another insurance, and it's constant takeaway because you're making maybe $30 more, so you're living in this state of stress all the time, as you wouldn't be if you know what you're making weekly and every month you have a job. So I don't agree with that. And the livable wage in Vermont would be like 18, 20, but places, they do not pay that. They do not pay that. And not everybody gets that, those extra childcare credits, it's not true. I have not gotten that much help, as I said, and I got a lot of stuff taken away for a little bit of money. And I go back and I reapply, and I explain my circumstances. And without these benefits, I wouldn't have been able to spend time with him, being laid off. So I am thankful and blessed for that and what Vermont does offer us. But then on the flip coin, I realized that things do have to change, because as a single mom, there is not a lot of, you're kind of stuck. So you go back, you don't make enough money, or you don't go back, and you might make on unemployment a good amount of money, but what is that to your mental health, like they were saying? And what is that? You're a mom already. You do want that break. You want to feel like you're doing something, right? But you have to make sure that you're making a livable wage to have a good daycare, have food on the table, have health insurance. And without that, I have to stay on unemployment unless I find something that's going to suit the needs of me and my family. And I think that that's what everybody is at. They don't not want to work, but what's better? $1,000 a week on unemployment, and the help to take care of what's important to them, or going to work on not a livable wage. So I think, and then getting things taken away. So this extra money, I think, would really help people to have a little extra time. And if they make the top dollar unemployment, but it will give them cushioning. And I really think that it is something that would actually really help people to going back when it's over, because things don't just go right back. There's other people that are afraid or have underlying issues. Even with the vaccine, you're not foolproof. I understand things have to open and economy has to get going, but it's also like people have personal things going on in their lives and they need to feel like they have a little cushion or a little help to ensure that things can happen for them, you know, the best way possible. Unemployment, they ended up giving me my money back, but it took a long time and it took a lot of phone calls, with legal aid. I had help, but you know, and it's still, I have an inside contact and I have to make sure I call her, because if I don't, I'm going through loophole to loophole, worrying about what I need to do. So it's not a fun thing to do. And I think people need that extra help to support themselves going through all this. So
Jocelyn,
that's my story.
thank you, Jocelyn. Let me ask you a question, open up to other questions.
Sure.
If I assume you're at the maximum unemployment,
Yes.
when you did you get 513 or
Yes.
531? Okay, so if I assume you're there, our bill would increase that. It's scheduled on its own to go to 550 on July 1st, and we are proposing going to 637. So that's $87 more a week, plus a $50 benefit, $137 a week more. Would that make a substantial difference to you if you got $137 more dollars a week?
Yes. It would make a big, because that would make up for some of the food, you know, costs that they took away from me. And that would help with diapers and, you know, extras that I need for my child. So yes, that would make a huge impact.
So what were you making? What were you making a week when you were laid off?
What was I making a year?
Oh, well, a week. Can you break it down to a week? Because I calculate your benefits at being, if this bill went through as is, as being 637 plus 50, so 687 a week. What would
When I was employed, I was making like 35 an hour, I think. So I would bring home after taxes, let me see, so about $960 something a week.
What would it be before taxes? Because you are
12 something, 13 something.
Okay. So you're
So
still,
it was a high amount of money, but
okay. So about half. Okay. Thank you.
yeah.
Very much.
And
Any
now,
other-
I mean, after taxes with unemployment, you don't, that's the thing. They take the gross, you know, but after taxes are out, you get your unemployment. It's still almost $700 a week, which,
Right.
okay, you know, but when you put in food costs rising, you know, inflation of gas and then diaper costs, and if you have more than one kid, I'm going to tell you, it's really borderline. You know, you can't save for anything else. You know, if something comes up, I just had not that everyone need to know, I just had an incident of actually a domestic violence incident. My window broke. Someone broke my window. So I'm going through a lot on my own. I had to put out, you know, $400. I had to ask my dad to help because I don't have that extra income right now. Right. So things come up in life. And I think that extra money that you guys are proposing is just more of a cushion for things that come up in life, you know? So I agree with it completely.
Any
Come here, little guy.
for Jocelyn?
Sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, Jocelyn, first, I just want to say it's really a brave thing to do to put your story out there. You know, it's not easy to let the public sort of weigh in on everything you're trying to do. And your little guy's super cute and has been really good for most of this. If you can still answer this question, great, but it's okay if not. I was just wondering what you think the childcare search will look like for you going back, you know, trying to find work, et cetera. What are you anticipating over the summer to try and, you know, get your little one situated before you can go back to work?
To be honest, I'm trying to hope that I find a remote job. I do have my old boss who I worked for is hopefully going to open up maybe a position for me come May or June in the medical device industry, but it's remote. I'm looking more for remote because of the cost of childcare. He does need socialization, of course. I don't have a lot of family. It's me that are close by. So I've already been searching some places, and a lot of them are for toddlers, and they are booking out far. He's just a little guy, he's be 9-10 months. And I'm worried. I don't think that it's going to overnight, I'm going to get somewhere in, and then they're going to say, oh, here's 100%, subsidy for childcare. I'm in a state of worry. Months go fast, as I know now with him, they go fast. And September, I've got student loans that are going to start back up too, that are almost $400. So that alone with that cushion helped as well. But like, man, it's a struggle. I'm not really looking forward to it because I'm not finding what I need really out there. And I've been a little frustrated. I've lived here my whole life, I've got local friends and family. I'm from Addison County, and they have friends, family watch and stuff like that. But it's expensive. Childcare is expensive, very expensive.
Jocelyn, thank you so much. That is.
Yeah, no, thank you for letting me speak.
It's exceptional to have someone come in and do that. So
Yeah.
we need to move
Thank you.
on because we're running out of time. So I'd like to hear from,
Thank you.
yes, thank you. From Austin at this point. Good morning, Austin.
Good morning, and I need to apologize. I'm in Winooski, and the F-35s are landing right now, so I'm not sure if you hear that.
Heard a little bit.
You can probably hear a little bit of it. Well, for the record, Austin Davis, the Government Affairs Manager for the Lake Champlain Chamber, and this bill has certainly created some anxiety in all corners of Vermont, and we thank you for taking the time to invite us to speak to the concerns of the business owners and employers who have been weathered a really difficult year. And we look forward to when we can also collaborate on other issues outside of this. And I have to say, I miss seeing all of you in person in the State House, and I can't help but think that this would be a much easier conversation to have if we could all sit around the same table and share these stories as we have today. That being said, I guess I'll just jump into testimony and say, I just want to make a quick, as you do often in legislation, I want to make a couple findings of fact from the Lake Champlain Chamber that kind of give you important context to our testimony. And the first I'd like to make is just that this program is not shared. It's not a shared cost between employers and employees, which is a statement I've heard repeatedly in this committee. I just want to take a second to reiterate that the tax is only assessed on employers for the UI Trust Fund. Second, employers are just not responsible for the increased use of the UI Trust Fund in 2020. Unlike other recessions, where UI Trust Fund usage has been for economic reasons, the usage during 2020 has been as a direct result of government orders closing places of employment or curtailing them to the point where they cannot carry out business as usual. Third, I'd like to say, I've not heard from a single employer to date that in the state that thinks because of the above stated fact that this is for no fault of their own, that they don't feel like the businesses community should come forward and help close the $300 million hole that those orders put in the trust fund. And employers have expressed, on the other hand, just concern about the rate at which they have to climb out of that hole. And that was really the origin of the administration's proposal. I think there's been a lot of discussion around, is this a delay? Is it this? Is it that? It really, from our perspective, this is a conversation about how to climb out of a hole that's no one's fault. And certainly not the employer's fault. If they had their way, a global pandemic wouldn't happen and everybody would have kept employed and business would have gone as usual. We would have had, the lovely events and weddings and, different things that we all love in our communities. And finally, I just want to reiterate that limiting a rate schedule increase is not a gift or handout to employers. It's simply adjusting the pace at which we close the hole created by the orders to close down or curtail operations through no one's fault. And it's also not a savings, as you know, this is just a moment to collectively catch one's breath, as I think Jordan said very well earlier. I also just want to take a second to thank Senator Rahm for your kind words earlier today around how this is, some mutual compassion is needed in this. This is not an easy conversation, and businesses wouldn't wish that anybody would be on UI or that they would have to shut their doors entirely or partially. I mean, they're staple parts of their community. My family owns a business, in Vermont as well. Everyone's heartbroken by the situation we're in, and I think we just all need to acknowledge that moving forward. Business owners care deeply about their employees, and let's remember that over 70% of businesses in the state are 10 employees or under, and so these are not just hypothetical people to them; these are friends and to many family. We're appreciative, of the perspectives that have been given here today. Particularly appreciative of the and an agreement with the comments made by Patty, Aaron, and Talina. I did want to circle back around to one point. There, and this is slightly tangential, but there was a question around the taxability of PPP loans as opposed to the taxability of UI benefits, and I think that there's a distinction there, and that PPP it stands for Paycheck Protection Program. It is a almost parallel UI system that the federal government set up to keep people on their payrolls. There is an additional percentage of the loan that can go to other costs, but however, those are specified costs such as protective equipment and different changes that have been made due to COVID. And if employers don't follow the specific criteria around applying that money to payroll and those other specified costs, they are on the hook for those grants as loans. And so I think that's an important thing to keep in mind when we're talking about the taxability of PPP. And we're really grateful for, I know some of you are in committees that did work on the federal link that treats the first 10,200 of UI benefits as tax-free. We're in support of that. I also just think, I need to emphasize that, and I don't think I can emphasize enough, just how much the federal government came through for Vermonters with enhanced UI benefits, child tax credit, child care and dependency tax credits, and direct payments. And I think actually I should say more so the government since January has done this with the American Rescue Plan Act, which has made very generous benefits that will be effective July 1st. So that's 4 months from now when this legislation is set to take effect. I think Talina did a great job highlighting some of these from a firsthand perspective. However, I'll just reiterate that come July 1st, there'll be an additional $300 on top of our state UI benefits. The first 10,200 from last year's will be tax-free. That'll come to about 12.6 million for the state in revenue expenditure. Also worth noting that 100% of premiums are subsidized for COBRA coverage for those on UI. ARPA also extended a great deal of help to individuals on and off UI. You heard about, everybody knows about the direct payments of $1,400, which are per dependent. And, that really equates to a $50 dependent benefit for 28 weeks right there. It's expected that 89% of Vermonters will actually receive these benefits, and it'll be cumulatively upwards of 731 million that will come to the state. You also heard about an increase in the child tax credit of up to $3,600, which is equivalent of a federal dependency benefit of up to $70 per week. And that's effective for folks who make up to about $150,000 a year. So really that's an across the board, fully refundable monthly allowance that the IRS will be giving for folks who have children. And that's been expanded to also go to individuals up to the age of 17. If at that point they can receive $3,000 rather. There was a comment earlier about folks who don't have dependents and additional help. It's worth noting that there's an increase in the earned income tax credit, the EITC, and there's also an expansion to those who don't claim dependents. And that will actually come to the state at expected revenue expenditure of about $6.2 million. And then finally, I think, just noting that as well as the fact, that we are looking at hopefully, in July 1st being fully reopened, and it will be safe for folks to come back to work. And we should be at a place of relative normalcy, as experts from the national level down to our state level have said. And I think, at that point, it's worth noting that some folks might have an offer to rehire. However, there will be folks who their original job is not there anymore. And so there will, without a work search requirement, there will be no incentive to necessarily jump in, as was discussed earlier. So I could pause there for some questions on that. I know I just said a lot there.
Well, I guess I have a general question. As the Lake Champlain Chamber, are you a member or part of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce?
We are not. We have engaged with the U.S. Chamber with regards to some kind of, like informational sessions, trainings, and that. We're actually more closely associated with the Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives, which skews more towards municipal and metropolitan area chambers.
So I'm hearing you lay out a lot of federal largesse that really I don't want to use a politically incorrect word, but makes the amount that we're talking about really relatively small in size in terms of help that's going out to people who are poor, people who are on unemployment, and it somehow is a disincentive for work. So I'm just wondering, did you guys weigh in against the federal stimulus package?
No, I think that the federal stimulus package was exactly what this country needed to get back to where we are. I think that the interesting thing about looking at what S10 does in the context of the federal money is that the marginal impact of an increase in claimant benefits with Vermont dollars is rather small compared to what the federal government is providing. They've stepped in a big way. However, the marginal impact in cost on employers is very high. And that kind of raises the question that should we let the federal government bear the cost? Should we be grateful that the cost is shifted to the feds rather than Vermont employers? We could take a dollar out at a high marginal cost out of Vermont employers, which they could be using to reopen and recover, and then apply it to benefits where it has a small marginal impact in comparison to all of this coming from the feds. And that might be great, but is that the best use of that dollar? And to us, we'd rather see us lean more heavily on the benefits coming from the feds and leave those dollars in a place right now to have that collective catching a breath and put them to work at reopening and reinvigorating our economy.
Okay. Any questions for Austin? Thank you, Austin. Senator Rahm.
So Austin, after listening to someone like Jocelyn tell her story, I know Lake Champlain Chamber has been a big supporter of policy around childcare. Are your individual members going to try and do anything different come reopening time to help families and to help people with children who need different supports to get back to work?
Well, I think, one of the very exciting things about this ARPA package is these child care, community development block grant style funds that are going to come to us that will really help us make a major investment in overhaul on our child care system. And you folks are going to get H-171 in no time over here. And that's going to be, I think, substantially change in the context of these ARPA dollars. And I really think that, I think everyone across the board, you can't sit down with any employer and have a conversation where they don't mention childcare as a barrier to employment. And we had issues with getting folks into the workforce before this pandemic. And we think that to a large part, that was because folks were on the sidelines because of, the very economic household kitchen table decisions we're talking about today. Does it make more sense to be working, or does it make more sense to not be working? For a lot of families, it came out to be, and I know personally families that and my wife and I are in trying to plan 5-10 years out, we're even having those conversations where, does it make sense for one of us to be working if a lot of our salaries would just go to childcare? So I think that ARPA, these really flexible funding as well as all of the funding that's directed to specific uses will create some flexibility for us for the state to even have a collective catching of its breath and rebuild our childcare system moving forward.
So can I just ask to make sure, and maybe this was in a letter, but the chamber opposes a dependent benefit?
So we could see a path forward on and I was going to kind of jump back into the substance of the bill. I wanted to stop and just kind of offer up an opportunity for questions and everything I said. On the dependency benefit, we could see a path forward on that. I think the thing that really stands in the way of us is, from our perspective, when we're in a hole, our answer isn't necessarily to dig the hole deeper before trying to set a pace out. And that's what we think that the 20% benefit does at this time. We can, as I believe Patty and Talina and others have supported, I think we could have conversations around a $25 dependency benefit moving forward after the federal enhancement has expired, and with a sunset in 2022. I'd offer up that I think it'd be great to have a report at the time of when that sunset's approaching, where we could better understand the impact of that dependency benefit. However, when we look at these stacking of cost, as employers have to climb out of this $300 million hole that is there for no fault of their own, I think just seeing the 20% and then the dependency, it just feels like we're digging the hole deeper before we start digging it out. And folks have been willing to climb out of that hole. They're just kind of hit a breaking point when they're also asked to dig it deeper first. So for us, I think for a request for immediate consideration would be to strike language around the increasing of the maximum benefit and the increase in the benefit calculation. Let's reconvene more stakeholders. I think this is great. How many folks are on this today, how many different perspectives we have around the dependency benefit. We didn't see that much perspective before the dependency benefit was passed out of committee. I think we'd love to see more conversation about that. And I think folks in the House would be open to that as well. I think another additional request for immediate consideration would be a conversation around adding language to the bill that removes 2020 from calculations of the trust fund's balance size going forward. I think you made an excellent point earlier, Senator Rahm, that it's helpful to know what our mortgage cost is ahead of time so we can have this holistic conversation. It does feel a little bit as if we're talking about all these different, house projects without actually knowing what the mortgage is before we buy the home. And so that is something I think would be beneficial.
So, Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Senator Clarkson.
Hi, Austin. It's good to see you. Yes, I'd like to be talking about student debt too. Did I just hear you say that you'd like us to consider freezing the maximum benefit?
Striking language from the bill that is increasing the maximum benefit. It
goes up by statute that every year 1%, the maximum benefit. So it is scheduled to increase for next year. We have not, our proposal is the 20%.
From the proposed language, in the proposed language, you had a increase of the maximum benefit to $637 per week. We would strike that language from the bill and allow the automatic increase to just carry out.
Right. And so did I hear that you would be willing, so obviously we're entertaining, one of the things we're looking at is a study of what the right size is for the trust fund, and that would be weighed, whether or not to discount 2020. Obviously that would be a piece of what would come to us hopefully next January for recommendation on how we begin to right size the UI trust fund. Given that we're going to be reviewing that, did I hear you say that you'd possibly support a $25 per family dependent benefit for 1 or 2 years, if with a study, data, and a review, a sunset?
I'd have to look back at your latest joint fiscal, or I don't believe it's joint fiscal, apologies. The latest numbers from the dependency charts from Mr. Barowitz. I believe that, that might be a 2-year might mean a more substantive study that you folks could have before the sunset. That's something, that we're open to discussing. I just think in the context of the 20% benefit increase that comes from both the formula change and the maximum benefit change that you folks are proposing, I just think at that point we kind of start to worry about cost overruns and digging the hole deeper. So if those are not absent, then we feel much better about if those are absent, we could feel much better about the dependency benefit conversation and having that going forward. As far as the right sizing of the trust fund, I think that everyone can say that 2020 was an anomaly. 2020 is a glitch in the system. It's something that this UI trust fund was not built to. It's a trough so deep and so elongated that no trust fund was really looking to understand it. However, that being said, at the amount of money we had in the trust fund, we did weather it. And we know that if we were ever to see an event this dramatic again, the federal government would step in with supplemental help. And so I think striking 2020 from any future balance calculations is not a large move, because I think we can all agree that 2020 is an anomaly.
Thank you.
Okay, Austin, thank you very much. You're very articulate. Appreciate your time. So I'm going to move to Carrie Brown, please.
Sure.
Hello, thank you very much. For the record, I'm Carrie Brown. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Commission on Women, and I really very much appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak to this today. As you are all well aware, this pandemic has hit women much harder than it has hit men. And in trying to think about solutions, I am appreciative of some of the creativity that's coming up and some of the willingness to look at disparate impacts might need different kinds of solutions than we have done in the past. So I greatly appreciate you talking about this. I do want to note that it's interesting we're talking right now because today's Equal Pay Day. This is the day when the average American woman has to work to make the same amount of money the average American man made last year. It's worth noting that this is the average for all women, but for white women, the Equal Pay Day doesn't come until next month, April 9th. For Black women, it doesn't come till August 3rd. For Native American women, it doesn't come till September 8th. And for Latinas, it doesn't come until October 21st. And so women are really behind. And as you've heard many times already, this pandemic has shown us some of the really fundamental cracks that we have in our society. It's really shown us some of the inequities that we have, and it has made them much worse in many cases. And this is a really perfect example of how to look at this. So that's where we're starting with this huge difference in earnings for men and women. We're also starting from a place where women are doing much more of the dependent care than men are. This is pre-pandemic. Women are at least 4 times more likely to reduce their work or to leave altogether than men are so that they can take care of family responsibilities. We have been living with a motherhood penalty forever. So when women have children, their earnings go down. When men have children, their earnings go up. It is, I would say, completely reasonable to expect that parenthood poses challenges to maintaining one's earnings and to maintaining a career or being in the workforce. But it's not reasonable that it affects women so much more negatively than it does men. This has always been true. Mothers earn only 70% of what fathers earn. It's a really dramatic difference. The poverty rate for women in Vermont is much higher than it is for men, particularly when we're looking at single parent households, which is really germane to this topic today. Pre-pandemic, families led by single men have a poverty rate of 16%. Families led by single women, it's almost twice as much, 36.7%. That is over a third of the families with single moms in Vermont are living in poverty. And you all know how low that actually is. And then livable wage. If we're going to talk about poverty, we got to talk about what's an actual livable wage. And before the pandemic, almost 40% of women in Vermont working full time were not making the livable wage for a single person, much less that for someone who has children. So the amount of money that the Joint Fiscal Office has calculated it takes to be able to support a family in Vermont is so much higher than minimum wage. It's so much higher than unemployment benefits. It's so much higher than all of these benefits combined. And that has been the case pre-pandemic. And so that's kind of the starting point. And then from the pandemic, it all just got so much worse. And one of the main ways we see this get worse is the disproportionate amount of time that women are spending on family care, and the expectation that women will be the ones who will take care of families, the expectation that women will be the ones who will reduce their work hours, will leave work altogether, and to care for children when childcares are closed, when schools go online. It has been mothers who are picking up that slack. Now, all parents have increased the time that they've spent on those activities, but mother's time has increased even more than father's time. So they were doing more to begin with, and now they're doing even more than the more that they were doing before. They also reduced their working hours by 4 to 5 times as much as men did when the pandemic first hit. Working mothers have dropped their time at work by 50% more than working fathers. So it's not hitting parents equally. It's really hitting women much more strongly. You've heard a lot about women's unemployment in Vermont. I know that Joyce Manchester provided tons of fantastic information for you so that you know that women are still a much greater proportion of those filing unemployment claims in Vermont than men are, and that we're way out of whack with where the rest of the country is. The rest of the country is getting back to more of the normal trends where typically we see the proportion of men is higher than that of women filing unemployment. We're getting back to that nationally. It's flipped back now. Instead of women being the higher, it's men nationally, not in Vermont. And we've got a long way to go. So, and then we also have issues with women just leaving the workforce entirely. And they have left the workforce at 4 times the rate of men. The women's employment rates across the country have dropped down to 1987 levels. We haven't seen a labor force participation rate this low since 1987. This is a generation's worth of progress that is being just undone in front of our eyes. And we're going to feel the effects of this for years to come. This isn't something that we're just going to get out of in the next year or two. That women's labor force participation, their earning trajectories, it's going to be decades. Getting back into work after dropping out completely to take care of children is very hard. Losses are much more severe and enduring, and it's going to be a lot harder to secure employment in the future. So this is to paint a bleak picture, but there are many, many ways to address this. And I would say that you can kind of be thinking in terms of short-term, long-term, and structural remedies. And my grand hope for this whole pandemic is that we will take some hard looks at the structural inequities that we're facing and figure out ways to make long-term changes that will, really get at that. And so, for instance, things like, what kind of jobs is it that women are doing? A big part of why the unemployment rate for women is so high in Vermont is because so many of them are doing jobs like working in restaurants and working retail, and the percentage of tipped wage workers in Vermont is much, much higher than the national average. And those are the jobs that are being hit most hard. But also we did a really extensive statewide survey not too long ago. And one of the things we heard over and over again was that people were finding jobs, but they were not finding good jobs. They were having a really hard time finding a job that paid well enough to support their family, that had benefits, that offered some kind of opportunity for growth. And so that's some of the structural challenges that are in place here when you're talking about unemployment. But if you want to kind of back up and think about really short-term impacts, there are people obviously who are really in dire straits right now. I mean, we're really at kind of a crisis situation for a lot of people in Vermont, which I know you understand. But so something like a dependent care benefit for unemployment insurance is a way to use an equity lens when you're looking at the problem that you're trying to solve, and to think about, who's being harmed, who's benefiting, who's being burdened. This is something that Susanna Davis talks about a lot. And when we're thinking about the impacts of any policy or budgetary decision that we're making in state government right now, we are being tasked with thinking about the equity impact of that. So that includes who's standing to benefit and who is standing to lose. And whenever we look at a proposal, we are instructed to ask, does this reduce disparities for marginalized or underserved groups, or does it increase them? What are the anticipated positive outcomes? Can these positive outcomes be extended to other groups? Does this proposal enhance services to underrepresented or underserved communities? And so we're really integrating this into our work, and I think that the disparate impacts of COVID are giving us all good opportunities to think about who's actually being affected in what ways, and how can we take action that's going to be targeted and focused on the help that is actually needed by the people who have been underserved. So that's where I'll stop, and I'll take any questions or give you any more information if I can. Thank you very much.
So I just have one question, Carrie, and I think we've had this answered before. In terms of Joyce Manchester's work, the 73% of UI recipients back then being women, unemployment claimants, what is your analysis of why that is?
Well,
why did Vermont get so specifically hammered in that regard?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a question that Joyce and I have talked a lot about together. It's not an easy one to answer. I do want to just point out, just to make things a little bit worse, that's the November figure, 73%. In October, it was 74%. So it was even a little bit worse. But I do think that a lot of it has to do with the kind of jobs that women are working in Vermont. Women are much more likely to work in minimum wage jobs or other low wage jobs. They're more likely to work in retail. They're more likely to work in things like food service, those tipped wage jobs, as I was talking about before, things like childcare, nurses, aides, those kinds of things are heavily dominated by women. 82% of personal care workers, which includes childcare employees, are women. 91% of nurses are women. 82 or 3%, I think, of all healthcare workers are women. And, just on a personal note, my son worked in early childhood for 2 years fairly recently. And, it's a little bit of a different situation for him because he's a man and he's also a college student and doesn't need to support a family, but he didn't crack $12 an hour at his childcare job that he worked at for 2 years. And so the wages are, anyway, sorry, I'm going off on another tangent here, but the kinds of jobs that women are working in is a huge part of it.
Okay, any other questions for Carrie?
I have one, Mr. Chair. Carrie, good to see you. At one point, I was told late in the fall that the women being sucked out of the workforce at the rate they have been in COVID has had a $64 billion impact on our economy. Do you have an updated figure for that? Because it's having a huge economic impact on our economy, and it must certainly have grown substantially by then.
I'm sure it has. I don't have a particular number that I can offer you right now, but I can tell you that it has definitely grown, and it's going to continue on. So this isn't just something that's a 2020, 2021 experience. This is an impact on our whole economy that is going to be years and years to come. And so we're just going to see it multiplying. And yeah.
It would be interesting to get that figure, just because it's going to be huge, as you have said.
I agree.
Thank you very much, Carrie. So I think our last witness is Mary Farley from the insurance group, or the insurance trade group. I'm sorry, I'll let you introduce yourself. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate it. And for the record, Mary Farley, Executive Director of the Vermont Insurance Agents Association. So thank you for undertaking this work, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to share some perspectives and thoughts today. I believe that the Insurance Agents Association has a unique perspective because by virtue of our profession, we focus every day on making people whole after a crisis. And this is certainly what this team is endeavoring to do. We advise individuals and businesses on this daily. And in fact, our workforce was deemed essential because we respond in times of crisis. So for that, we were very grateful. And we're grateful for the role that we play in the fabric of our economy. With that as a backdrop, we completely respect and understand the need to replenish the UI fund. There's no question in our mind about that. We support removing 2020 from the calculation for the funding requirements, because then we allow for a more accurate picture of what the funding needs to be. And it sets it at a level that is both practical and responsible on all sides. Frankly, it's just not appropriate to include a 100-year global pandemic as part of the main foundation. Once the funding bar is set responsibly, it is to everyone's advantage to pace that timetable for replenishment. Holding the rate table for this year and delaying the increase allows those Vermont businesses, including the insurance agencies, to, I think that's been an often used phrase, breathe, to catch their breath. It allows them to get their legs under them, to bring employees back to work, to welcome customers back into locations, and to pay back loans that have kept them afloat to this point. Holding the table increase to 2 steps allows that breathing to continue. So we're grateful for that opportunity if that comes forward through this bill. This allows the overall economy to come back into balance. I very much appreciated Senator Rahm's comment earlier about finding compassion on both sides. We have to find that fulcrum, and we have to create a balance. I think Jordan referred to it earlier as well. There's no actual relief here, if I can put it that way, because the money has to go back into the pot. It's just the timing, and consideration of that timing, I think, is critical for all of us and for the fabric of the overall economy in Vermont. As to the dependent benefit, we can see a path forward with a $25 additional weekly benefit per claimant with dependents that would take place after the additional federal benefits expire. And that would continue through the end of the fiscal year in 2022. I think this reflects the exit ramp that people have talked about being an important thing. It is an important thing. And we understand that families have needed and will continue to need additional support. While unemployment is a piece of that path, I think also the lion's share of responsibility lies in other legislative proposals, particularly the ones around childcare that several of the previous testifiers have spoken to. Again, just simply because many things have been said that I'm echoing here, but we are grateful for our role in the state of Vermont, and we're very grateful for the role that you play in the state of Vermont in bringing this fabric of our economy back together in a responsible and forward-thinking manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, very much. Does anybody have any questions for Mary? Okay, well, I think that ends our, yes, Senator Clarkson.
Thank you, Mary. I'd just like to ask, because we've asked of everybody else, how many insurance agencies do you represent in this association?
Right. So we have 77 member agencies, and then we have additional members who are part of the infrastructure around insurance. So not only insurance companies are participants, but other providers like the glass repair people when your windshield cracks, those other things, the Pure Cleans of the world when they come in to clean up after a disaster. So overall, we have over 100 members, 77 particularly are insurance agents.
Thanks.
I believe in my letter too, we stressed how 77% of those, or 75% of those members are 7 employees or fewer. So these are small agents, family businesses that are trying to keep their people together and support their families at the same time. Thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you for committee. We will reconvene at 8:30 tomorrow morning. I assume there'll be conversations ongoing throughout the day. I think we all continue to hope that we can reach the elusive consensus, but we'll see you in the morning. And I assume that if there's going to be any changes to the bill as passed out of the committee or to Senator Brock's amendment that he had drafted, we'll have those ready to go first thing in the morning. I think we know what the issues are.